Hey everybody, welcome to the video. This one we're breaking down the Thursday Night Football Showdown Slate over on Draftkings for week 1 of the NFL season, and actually the first game of the NFL season. And it should be a very good game. We have two explosive offenses in Kansas City and Houston, and a 54-point over-under in Vegas, which is the highest on the entire week 1 NFL slate. Now, it's a 10-point spread, so this could get a little lopsided, but this should be a very exciting game. We have tons of studs here. We have Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and plenty of other options as well, including David Johnson, who's a bit dusty these days, but still, it should be a very, very fun game, and I am looking forward to it. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm here all season long trying to help you guys become better NFL DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you want to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm at ChrisPennell16 over on Twitter, CPen16 over on IG, and if you want to support my content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got 300 plus people. You can hop into the Discord chat and just get access to all the extra content that I put out throughout the entire day or throughout the entire week, depending on the sport. So like I said, links down below if you're interested. If not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So last year, if you watched my videos, we kind of just went on the Draftkings page and went in descending order of the salary, but I kind of put it on the spreadsheet here. I'm going to go position by position, and we'll start up top here with the best play on the slate. We have Patrick Mahomes, 12,600. Is he super expensive? Sure, but it doesn't matter if he comes out and throws over 300 yards and 4+ touchdowns. Even then, he's going to be very high owned, and he's the safest play on the slate. He's got the highest floor, and he's got the highest ceiling as well, and he draws a fantastic matchup here versus Houston in this game environment. Just screams tons of points for the Kansas City Chiefs. And last time they played Houston in the playoffs, they dropped 51 real-life points versus them. Not saying that's going to happen again, but look, the Kansas City Chiefs offense is insane. There's just so many good pieces. And you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire now. You got, obviously, you have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and then you have secondary options and Sammy Watkins, McCole Hardman. I mean, this is a very, very deep offense, and if you try to sell it to stop Kelce, you're just going to throw it to Hill. If you're going to sell it to stop Hill, you're going to throw it to Kelce, you're going to run the ball with Helaire or pass the ball to Helaire. You really can't stop this offense. You can only try to hope to contain it. So yeah, Mahomes, obviously a fine option here. We could look at his numbers. You guys get the idea. Nearly 300 passing yards per game last season, nearly 2 touchdowns, over 34 pass attempts per game, 8.3 yards per attempt. And just elite numbers all around. Now, he doesn't typically run the ball, but we saw last season in the playoffs, he was starting to run the ball quite a bit. I don't think he had less than 7 rushing attempts per game. Also had a rushing touchdown versus the Tennessee Titans as well, if I remember correctly. So, Mahomes, if he's going to run the ball even a little bit, that's obviously going to be a boost to his game, but I really don't expect that. But he can get the job done through the air by itself. And if we're looking at the matchup here versus the Texans, it's a pretty good one. They struggled versus the run and versus the pass last year, but they were 26 DVA versus the pass. Allowed over 23 Draftkings points per game, 280 passing yards, over 2 touchdowns, and just this is a good spot for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And it's not really a question of if you play Patrick Mahomes, it's a question of if you use him in your captain spot or if you use him in your flex spot. I guess that's kind of up to you to decide, but I'm fine with him in either spot. But he's obviously the best play in the slate. So if you want to make him your captain at $18,000, I say go for it. I think there's enough value to get him in. Now, Deshaun Watson, 11,800. This is going to be interesting. He has never played a game before without DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup. Well, I say lineup like it's baseball, not lineup, but on the offense. So it's going to be a little interesting or a little bit weird here, but Watson should still be fine. And what I'm most interested in here is that Deshaun Watson typically plays very well when he's trailing. When he's trailing, he just loves garbage time, especially for fantasy purposes, and he still has some fine options. He's got Will Fuller, potentially he'll have Brandon Cooks, he's got Randall Cobb, he's got David Johnson out of the backfield, as well as Duke Johnson, and you have Kenny Stills too, so I think he's going to be perfectly fine here, and the game script should be pretty good. They are 9.5-point dogs on the road, so I assume they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit, and you also have that scrambling and rushing upside that Deshaun Watson offers us as well. When he tends to be playing from behind, he'll look to scramble as well, which is great for DFS purposes because quarterbacks that run the ball are definitely going to be very good in our lineups. Now, if you're looking at his numbers last year, about 33 pass attempts per game, a little bit over 250 passing yards, nearly 2 touchdowns per game, around 30 30 rushing yards. Didn't really run the ball too much, nearly less than 2.5 rushing attempts per game, but he's fine here. And again, playing from behind, I expect him to put up a pretty solid fantasy outing. Now, the matchup versus the Chiefs, they were a team you typically want to run the ball against, but I don't really think the Texans are going to have that luxury since they are nearly 10-point underdogs here. But Chiefs are 60 versus the pass, only allowed 17.6 points per game to QBs, 240 passing yards, and just overall, pretty stiff matchup. But again, talent, and then you have the positive game script here for the Texans. So Deshaun Watson, he's a good option. Now, if you want to get contrarian, I think a lot of people will play Patrick Mahomes in the captain spot. If you want to get contrarian, you could put Deshaun Watson in the captain spot and kind of hope the Chiefs just, kick a lot of field goals so they get a lot of rushing touchdowns, or Patrick Mahomes doesn't become an absolute necessity on the slate. And then if Deshaun Watson comes out, balls out, plays from behind, you could be looking very good in tournaments. Now, preferably, I'd rather play Mahomes in the captain spot. But again, if you want to get different, I don't hate Watson there. Then we'll move on to the running backs. And I should mention, I like getting both in my lineups. I would be hard-pressed if I'm playing a single entry not to have Watson and Mahomes on my lineup. But anyway, going to running backs, we have, I think what everyone's excited to see is the first NFL game for Clyde Edwards-Helaire here at 8,800. I know most of you probably took him in your first round of your fantasy drafts, and the Chiefs took him in the first round in the real-life draft as well, so they have high expectations too, and it should be a very good fit on this offense. We know how lucrative the RB1 spot is on an Andy Reid offense, and we saw Damian Williams have plenty of games where he balled out last season, and I think Helaire here has definitely more potential than Damian Williams, so we got to like him here. Now, there was some talk where we could see him around 15, 20 touches since he is a rookie at his first game. It would not surprise me if we see Darrell Williams at 1,800 get some work as well, which I'll talk about in a little bit, thinking he's a pretty good punt play. But look, he should have, even if he gets like 15 touches, those are going to be very efficient touches, and he's also going to be involved in the passing game as well. And I know he's a little bit pricey, 8,800, but look, the RB1 of the Chiefs, even at 10,000, he'd still be interesting. And this is a good matchup versus the Texans. They were 27th DVA versus the run last season, allowed nearly 28 DraftKings points per game, nearly 100 rushing yards, and also 53 receiving yards to running backs as well, and 6 receptions. So I definitely think Helaire here is in a pretty good spot. And if you want to spend 8,800 for him, I have no issues with that at all. It's also going to be a positive game script too, as 10-point favorites, or not 10, but 9.5, close to 10. So definitely like Helaire here, and I think everyone's going to be excited to play him. So I think that will draw some high ownership as well, but I think it's probably good chalk for the most part. And then we have Dusty David Johnson here at 7,600. And I say that because last season when you were watching him run the ball, he looked stiff, man. He just did not look good in the slightest. When we saw Kenyon Drake have his first game as a Cardinal, it was like watching a breath of fresh air. Like he looked so much better than David Johnson did. But I don't know. I think he's still a fine play at 7,600. I wouldn't say he's an absolute necessity here, but to beat the Chiefs, you typically need to run against them because they do struggle versus the run. They're very good versus the pass, but versus the run, they will struggle. But David Johnson, either way, should be fine because he's going to be involved in the passing game as well. And even though he kind of sucked last season, he was still a capable pass catcher. So that makes him fine in PPR scoring formats like DraftKings is. In his 9.5-point favorites, he could definitely see some dump-offs too. But they're going to make it a point to get him the ball because, look, they gave up a lot for David Johnson. They gave up DeAndre Hopkins, and they're not going to want to just put David Johnson to waste here. So they're going to get him the rock. I'm not sure how many times he's going to get the ball in this game, but I have to think he's going to look a little bit better than he did last season. So at 7,600, he's fine if you're looking at the matchup here specifically. 13th DVA versus the run last season, but allowed nearly 30 DraftKings points per game, over 100 rushing yards, and 0.63 touchdowns per game. Also nearly 59 receiving yards and about 6.25 receptions per game. So David Johnson's fine at this price tag, but he just doesn't get me as excited as Edwards-Helaire does, but I think that's kind of obvious. Now, Duke Johnson, 4,800, really just not interested in Duke Johnson. He's not a guy you can really bank on. Even last season without David Johnson, it's kind of hard to trust the guy. He doesn't really typically do too much. And if they're on the goal line, obviously David Johnson's going to get the ball here. So I'm not too excited about Duke Johnson. If they are trailing by a lot, I can see Duke Johnson definitely getting some. Obviously, he's going to get a couple of receptions, which is fine for PPR scoring, but he's nearly $5,000, which just seems like a bit too much. If he was in the very low 4K or the 3K range, I think he'd be a little bit more interesting, but I don't know. I'm not really liking Duke Johnson at 4,800. And if we're looking at his numbers last year, he barely did anything, and that's without David Johnson. And David Johnson's obviously going to cut into Duke Johnson's work by quite a bit. But if you're looking at his numbers, he had 3.8 targets per game, 25 receiving yards, 5 rushing attempts, and 25 rushing yards. I'd expect those numbers to come down. So Duke Johnson really just doesn't excite me too much on this slate. But Darrell Williams at 1,800, I actually think he's one of the better pump plays on the entire slate. So this is the first NFL game for Edwards-Helaire here, and they're also nearly double-digit favorites. So if they get to a decent lead, I think we could see Williams potentially get to 10 touches in this game. He's also a very good pass-blocking running back as well, so he's definitely going to see the field. And look, if they split the workload up just because it's the first week, if he gets around 10 touches, he's going to be viable at 1,800. I mean, 10 touches on the Kansas City Chiefs offense, not saying he's going to get 10, but if he can get like 6 to 10 here, I mean, 1,800, you don't need much, and that's going to allow you to fit in guys like Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill. So I think he's fine. Again, I'm not expecting a whole lot here for Darrell Williams, but 1,800, I think he's definitely worth a shot and definitely one of the better pump plays on the entire slate. Moving on to the wide receiver position, it's a fun one. You got plenty of good options here, but we'll start up top with Tyreek Hill at 10,400. You know what you're getting with Tyreek Hill. Not always the safest play in the world, but he's got slate-breaking upside, and he can certainly just win you a slate with one catch. Like, he could be, doing like 3 catches, 50 yards, kind of a whatever game, and all of a sudden you can see an 80-yard bomb, and it's Tyreek Hill wide open down the field because he burned his 2 guys defending him, and that's certainly what Tyreek Hill can certainly do. He's always got that upside of 200-yard receiving games with 2 touchdowns. This is a very, very good matchup here versus Houston. So I like Tyreek Hill, but I will say if you're picking between Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce in the slate, I'm going to side with Kelce because I feel he's a bit safer. He typically gets more targets. But Tyreek Hill loved the upside here. If you're looking at his numbers last year, I mean, a little bit over 7 targets per game, 70 receiving yards, over 1,100 air yards, 38% market share of the team's air yards, 58% weighted opportunity share, and a 21% target share. He's fine. It's a good matchup here versus the Texans, where he's actually got one of the biggest wide receiver versus cornerback matchups on the week, according to PFF. And if you're looking at the DVOA, their 26th DVOA versus the pass allowed nearly 40 Draftkings points per game to wide receivers and 150 receiving yards per game with 1.31 touchdowns. So I like the spot for Tyreek Hill. Just don't love the price tag, but if you're putting a bunch of lineups, you got to have some Tyreek Hill exposure. Now, if you're betting one, I could understand leaving him off if you don't have the salary, because I'd rather play Travis Kelce, but still an elite option in all formats. Will Fuller, 8,000. So this is going to be interesting for the Texans because they have never played without DeAndre Hopkins, the past few years. So I think we really just expect a boost to all these wide receivers. Will Fuller should get an uptick in usage. Brandon Cooks, if he plays, he'll get, obviously, I can't really say uptick because this is going to be his first game as a Houston Texan, but he'll have a decently sized role, and these guys are both burners. They can burn a defense deep. Then you kind of have the short yardage guy in Randall Cobb, and then Kenny Stills would move into the wide receiver 3 role if Brandon Cooks happens to miss this game. But Will Fuller, he's one of the few guys here that does have experience with Deshaun Watson. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. He'll also get the red zone looks as well. And we know Will Fuller's got plenty of upside. Him and Deshaun Watson have connected on many and many touchdowns over the course of the past couple of years. And the only issue is he is usually never healthy. But as of right now, he is healthy week 1, so there's probably not a better time to use Will Fuller when he is at full health because, in a few weeks, we're definitely going to probably see a hamstring injury for Will Fuller because it seems like he's always got something wrong with him. But I do like the guy. He's a good receiver. And if you're looking at his numbers last season, he was a little over 6 targets per game, 60 receiving yards, 20% target share, and an ADOT of 14.2. And again, that's with DeAndre Hopkins, so I'd expect these numbers to go up. And if they are trailing most of the game, which Vegas expects them to, this is going to be a very positive game script for the passing game for Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson. So I think he's a fine option. Now, the matchup is not good versus KC. They were very stingy versus wide receivers last season. They were 6th DVOA versus the pass, only allowed 26.1 DK points per game, and a little over 100 receiving yards as well. But I like the game script here, and look, I just like Deshaun Watson as a quarterback, and I think Will Fuller is going to certainly be fine here. The volume should be there, the talent's there, got a good quarterback, and I got a positive game script. So Fuller definitely makes some sense. Brandon Cooks, he's if he plays, he's a GPP option only. I wouldn't play him in cash games, although I really wouldn't recommend playing cash games on a showdown slate anyway. But Cooks, I mean, we're not really knowing what to expect. He's never played an actual NFL game with Deshaun Watson yet. He's also banged up, and I don't even believe he practiced yesterday, so he's trending in the wrong direction in that aspect as well. So we'll see. If he plays, he's a risky option. If he doesn't, obviously you're not playing him, and then you kind of bump up Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, and Will Fuller, just pretty much everybody for the most part. So we'll see if Cooks plays, but even if he does, he's a risky play that could end up paying off because, look, the guy's obviously talented, and he's kind of like a Will Fuller where he can burn a defense deep. So just keep your eyes peeled on the news on Brandon Cooks. Sammy Watkins, 5,800. He's a guy that can be an absolute no-show, or he can go off and break a slate. Like I believe last season, was that last year where he scored like 43 DraftKings points? Was that versus the Jaguars, if I remember correctly? But then there's some games he just does absolutely nothing. But in the playoffs, he actually stepped up a little bit. I think he scored 11 points in his first one, then 27, I want to say. And then he did well in the Super Bowl as well, having nearly 100 receiving yards. But at 5,800 as the wide receiver 2 for Patrick Mahomes, yeah, that's viable. If they can't get all the way up to Tyreek Hill, you can save nearly half his price tag and get in Sammy Watkins and get around your 6 targets. If you're looking at his numbers last season, he was at 6.29 targets per game with a 19% target share, 48 receiving yards, not a high ADOT, but he's okay. It's a good matchup versus the Texans, and look, you're the wide receiver 2 for Patrick Mahomes, so you're always going to be viable. Now, Mecole Hardman, 5,200. I think he's just overpriced here. He's not a guy that's going to get many targets in the slightest. And for only 600 more, you can get a much safer option in Sammy Watkins. So I really don't understand the pricing for DraftKings that on Mecole Hardman. Like, I like the guy. He's actually pretty good. But look, the targets just aren't going to be there. Last season, 2.25 targets per game, 7% target share, 9% market share of the team's air yards. And look, he's just not going to get that much work. And at 5,200, he just feels a bit overpriced. The matchup's good, and I don't really feel like anyone's going to play him at that price tag, but he's okay. I mean, he's the wide receiver 3 here, but I mean, it's just tough to pay that much for him. Kenny Stills, 4,600. He'd be a much better play if Brandon Cooks happens to miss this game, so that's just kind of TBT on that. But we saw games last season where when Will Fuller missed, that Kenny Stills was a viable DFS option. But we're going to have to wait on the Cooks news to even really talk about him. Randall Cobb at 4,200. Probably one of the better salary relief plays on this slate because he feels a bit underpriced. And I'd have to imagine he's going to get a decent amount of targets here. It's a positive game script, and he's kind of going to be the short yardage guy for the most part. If Cooks plays, you got Cooks and Fuller for the deep routes. And then you kind of got Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb. Well, I guess Kenny Stills really doesn't fit in the same category as Randall Cobb. But at only 4,200, I think Cobb's a fine option here. Again, new addition onto the Texans, but I like the price tag, I like the game script for the Texans here, and he makes a pretty easy fit into your lineups at that price tag. Then Demarcus Robinson, 2,200, really just not much interest here. Like if Hardman was down here, I'd have some interest in Hardman, but they way overpriced Hardman. They kind of put Robinson probably right around where he should be. About 3 targets per game last season, 28 receiving yards. Nothing exciting, but there's always a small chance that Hardman and Robinson could find the end zone, but if you're building one lineup, I don't see why you'd play Robinson or Mecole Hardman, to be honest. So move on to the tight end position. There's obviously a clear play here, and he's one of the best plays on the entire slate. And I would even hate if you put him in your captain spot. But Travis Kelce, 9,200, elite play, one of my favorite spots on the entire slate. In the playoffs last year versus the Texans, Travis Kelce went off. If you didn't have him, you were not winning a tournament because he scored 44.4 DraftKings points. He had 12 targets, 10 catches, 130, 140 yards with 3 touchdowns. They just had no answer for him. And that's the thing with the Chiefs. If you try to sell out to stop Kelce, they're going to burn you with Tyreek Hill. If you're going to sell out to stop Tyreek Hill, you're going to get burned by Travis Kelce. If you're going to try to stop both of them, they'll just run the ball on you with Allaire, or they're going to throw in the ball. So you really can't stop the Chiefs. You can only hope to contain them. Travis Kelce, obviously an elite option here, pretty much the best tight end in the league. Yeah, George Kittle's there as well. But fantasy-wise, Travis Kelce trumps all. If you're looking at his numbers last year, over 8 targets per game, 76 receiving yards per game, 24% target share, 53% weighted opportunity share, over 1,200 air yards. And look, I like all the Chiefs here versus the Texans. You could look at the matchup, but I really don't care about the matchup when it comes to Travis Kelce. He is matchup proof, and it's just hard to stop the Chiefs offense. They have the highest team total on the slate, so I would be shocked if Kelce doesn't find the end zone tomorrow, or today, whenever you're watching this video. Darren Fells and Jordan Akins, they're kind of just guys you're hoping for a touchdown. I mean, they pretty much had similar splits last season if you're looking at their numbers. Both were a little bit over 3 targets per game. Fells was getting more touchdowns with a half touchdown per game. Both had a 10% target share, around 20-ish receiving yards per game. They're just not that exciting. I just think there's better plays on this slate. Like Darren Fells, if you're paying $4,400 for him, just play Randall Cobb at $4,200. Like, I don't know, I just don't really like these Houston guys. Now, KC was a team that's not great versus tight ends, but I mean, they just don't typically get used too much in this offense. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, I'm just not going to play Ricky Seals-Jones. So that's pretty much it for the tight ends. We'll go to the defenses. I don't really like either defense in this game. It should be a very high-scoring affair, so I'm not really planning on playing either. But if you had to play one, you're obviously using the Chiefs at home, as they are nearly double-digit favorites. But even then, I just think both of these defenses really aren't the best plays in this slate because we're going to like both of these offenses quite a bit. Now, you can fully stack the Chiefs and just use the Chiefs defense. I get it, but I like Deshaun Watson here. I like some of his pass catchers, so not really too into the Chiefs defense. And the kickers, they are what they are. You really can't project these guys, but they both are good kickers. And Harrison Butker, I prefer him over Fairbairn just because I think I've said that name weird, but Kiami Fairbairn. I think I always say his name right. But both are pretty good, and look, it's going to be a high-scoring game, so both are going to be viable. Their upside's limited, sure, but they're cheap, and there's a decent chance Butker can get double-digit points here. He should kick quite a few extra points, and there's a good chance they'll be in scoring position where they can kick field goals all night long. So Butker, I feel like he's a pretty safe play, but the upside is limited as a kicker. Same can go for the Texans as well. But both are fine lineup fillers if you have around 3K left. That's pretty much going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. And I think I'll do a core play video later on in the week. And then we might do a lineup building video on Saturday as well. But we will see. But appreciate you guys watching. And I'll see you in the next one. And enjoy the game tomorrow or today.